Welcome to our Feel Great Coaching and Science call. I'm Suzanne Henninger, and I am excited to be with you tonight. I know many of you are in different stages of your personal health journey, your affiliation and familiarity with the Feel Great protocol, and we are just glad that you are here. Glad to learn more, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Coleen Andruss with us tonight. So Dr. Andruss, welcome. I've had the opportunity of working with her for over 11 years. And I remember first meeting her for the very first time, walking into an office area, and she came in her scrubs, sat down, and kind of had that serious doctor look on her face. And that was 11 years ago, and now we are best friends and often asked if we are sisters. So yes. I appreciate that. So that's one thing, is you get to be very good friends and familiar with a lot of people that you work with, and especially when you're helping people transform their health and transform their lives. So as many of you, but again, thank you for being on here tonight. Let me first, for those of you that I have not had an opportunity to meet, let me just kind of share with you a little bit more about me. And so you kind of know where I've come from and where my journey has been over the last 30 years with Unicity, which is the manufacturer. And I've been using this protocol and been helping people transform their health for the last 30 years. And I love these products. They have transformed my personal health. In 12 weeks, I lost 27 pounds and 30 inches. And I share that with you, as Dr. Andruss will too. We've all been on that journey of having been in the situation where some of you are at, right? We're at all different in different levels of our journey, but we've all struggled with weight. We've all struggled with certain food addictions, etc. And so we're in a common and a familiar and a safe area. But I was attracted to this for my own personal transformation. I have a huge family. I had two sets of twins. And of course, you can imagine after that set of twins, I had some major weight to lose. Through the years, I've become healthier, stronger. Our daughters got us involved in triathlons. At the age of 50, I competed in 2 half Ironmans. I share that with you because I was not always healthy. I was not fit. I struggled most of my early adult years being overweight. In fact, even in high school, I was on every diet with my mom. I was raised in a household where food was a reward, food was comfort, whether it was pie or ice cream or homemade bread, it was carbs, carbs, and more carbs, right? But I was rewarded with food. And in that type of environment, you kind of grow up. And I probably have the worst willpower of any of you on here tonight. But just know that through this protocol and by helping people transform their lives, there's nothing better than that. And before I introduce Dr. Andruss, I just simply want to share with you some of the results and the transformations that people are experiencing using this fiber fasting protocol, using the 2 food-based, science-based products and Feel Great to help bridge the gap from where they are to where they want to be. Elisa, perfect example. She and women going through menopause, etc. She was dealing with thyroid, Hashimoto's disease, hypothyroidism. She had adrenal gland issues. She also had high cortisol levels. In 5 months, she dropped almost 60 pounds. She went from a size 14 to a size 6. But what is most impressive, and I want to point out in this, are the blood lipid profile numbers. We are not just a diet company. This is not a weight loss product. This is not a diet. This is a metabolic health system. And as you will hear with Dr. Andruss, this is what was attractive. She was attracted to, is that was an overall metabolic system, helping to improve cholesterol levels, triglycerides, reducing the chances of heart disease, etc. Improving A1C. Elisa here took her A1C from 5.7 pre-diabetic down to 5.3. And so you can see just the overall metabolic benefits, not only the transformation, losing 60 pounds, she looks like a completely different person, right? But then also Victor, who had an A1C of over 10, and now it's at 5.5. And as Dr. Andruss will probably talk about, we're talking too about losing that visceral fat that makes men look like they're 9 months pregnant, but they're not, right? So it targets that visceral fat and belly fat, and we'll talk more about that. Also, someone who, like Joe, you've been 6 years as a type 2 diabetic, not able to lose weight. Jean, his wife, metabolically unhealthy, and today now losing over 70 pounds, no longer type 2 diabetic, no longer medically diabetic, and just living a whole new life of energy and fitness. We have a lot of spouses, couples, partners that are doing this together, because as doing it together or doing it like you are here with a coach and someone else, that motivation, that extra level of accountability promotes greater success and better results. We've got, the guys that are just excited about losing about 5 inches or 5 belt notches, right? Losing the extra 12 pounds around that bare belly area of their body. And I've got other people like Kelly, who had literally been on diabetic medication, insulin, lost his job, no longer had insurance coverage, no longer could afford the medications, had gone off all of his medications and knew that his blood sugars were skyrocketing. In fact, they got up to 480. He then realized, I've actually got the Feel Great protocol on hand. And he thought, well, I'll give this a try, right? And so literally in 3 weeks, his blood sugars went from 480 down to 90. In 4 months, he lost a total of 75 pounds, took his A1C from 11.3 to 6.1. So we're all about these blood numbers, which you can prove the effectiveness of this protocol with before and after blood work. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. Dr. Andruss, as I mentioned, I have had the privilege of working with for 11 years. And she is probably the hardest, most dedicated working physician I have ever met, and have yet to see anyone that works as long hours that she does. I mean, we're talking 6 a.m. in the morning until 9:30 at night. In fact, I think we were texting back and forth last night, and it was 11:20 and she hadn't even left the office.
Yep, that's right.
I know, right? And see, and this is why in that second paragraph there, you can see that she is all about formulating individual plans. You're not going to get in her office and she's not going to spend 15 minutes max with you and you are out the door. She cares about her patients. She cares about all of you that have been on this protocol because she introduced it to you. She cares about making life better for individuals. And you can see here when Dr. Andruss got started, she can kind of tell her story to you. But she said, look, if I'm going to offer this to my patients, I'm going to try it on myself and I'm going to see that it works. And so she did that, and she has been an advocate for unicity. She has spoken at many of our conferences from a medical perspective. She's been part of some of our clinical studies. So Dr. Andruss, I'm excited that you're with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
So with that introduction, I think a lot of people are on here from a medical perspective. And with, let's talk about insulin resistance. When people come to you, what are you seeing as far as insulin resistance in your patients?
Yeah, before I talk about that, because you told your little story, I just want to make a comment about my story, because I used to weigh close to 200. And, just over the course of time, and it was a slow process. And I always tell my clients, my patients, that this is a journey and there are going to be bumps in the road. And so it took me a long time to lose weight, and I had reached a good weight. And this photograph that we're seeing here is actually then when I entered menopause, perimenopause. And that's such a huge issue in women when they hit menopause, because you can eat right, you can exercise, you can do all the right things. And as my picture depicts here, that no matter how good you are, it just happens. It happens viscerally. It happens in the belly fat. There are many, many studies that demonstrate that when we start to get into that hormonal imbalance, that's what happens. And it's really tough to lose that. And so when this program was introduced to me, I was super excited about the science. I was super excited about the studies that I read. And just the validation that that I had from knowing that there were products in the physician's desk reference. And so I went on the products, and I'd been trying to lose this menopausal weight, and I just couldn't, no matter what. And it was amazing. And as you see the after picture, and I have been able to maintain that, up to this point. So I just wanted to kind of share a little bit of my story as well.
And Dr. Andruss, but still today, you follow the protocol personally.
Oh, I use the products every day without fail for the last 11 years. I don't ever miss. It goes with me when I travel. It goes everywhere with me. So it for me also, I mean, not only did it help me lose this weight, but for me, it's helped the maintenance of what I've done so much easier. And it creates a system, it creates structure. And that's super important, when when you are trying to maintain, because if we become complacent and we start to become comfortable about what we've done, if I would have looked at this and said, oh my gosh, I feel amazing, I don't have to do this anymore, chances are that weight's going to come back on. And so what I love about this program, it is so doable for long term versus being on a medication or feeling like you have to struggle all the time. So the system has really made it it's made it easy. So
and I'm sure you've also experienced that in your patients, right?
absolutely. And so when I do primarily obesity medicine. I also am a hormone specialist and do a lot of hormone therapy. And they're so much interrelated. But insulin resistance is a very generic term, if you will, for basically, to make it simple, it's we all have to produce insulin. We have to have insulin in our bodies in order to take care of the sugar levels in our bloodstream that occur after we eat primarily carbohydrates. And what happens with insulin resistance is that our body is still producing enough insulin. It just doesn't work very well. And so our body becomes resistant to the insulin because our body is starting to work super inefficiently. And that then can lead to sugar cravings, extreme fatigue, increased belly fat, regardless of how good you eat, constant hunger, aches, pains, joint aches and pains, inability to sleep, development of hormonal imbalances. The list is right here in front of you. The brain fog, the depression, the aches, the pains. And when people don't take care of the insulin resistance and they don't treat that, insulin resistance is basically sort of like pre-diabetes. But eventually it can become diabetes, and we develop, you have an increased incidence of strokes and heart attacks, dementia, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibromyalgia, skin diseases. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So yeah, it's the biggest problem. Metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance is primarily the core of metabolic syndrome, and metabolic syndrome is the #1 health problem in the entire world.
Wow. So I
So,
think one
and
of
it's
the things,
treatable. It's very treatable.
okay, so let's talk about that because even though, I mean, again, the advancements and what I'm seeing here is, and you've probably seen this, even with the advancements of medications, right? And the advancements of different meds being introduced, metformin being a really popular medication to treat
Mhm.
obesity, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, right? These symptoms, PCOS, et cetera. And yet the rates or the prescribed cases of prediabetes, type 2 diabetes just continues to skyrocket. So there's obviously things like you said, it's the root cause. And so let's get into that. So the root cause of these chronic diseases, why, if we're prescribing more medications, why are things not improving?
That's an important, really an important thing to think about. And, um, I last week I was at the obesity conferences, all week, and, oh my gosh, the wealth of information and the wealth of data was just overwhelming. But it's so interesting because we have medications and we have systems and we have, ways to improve our eating, but the underlying source is our environment. I mean, you can certainly have genetics, okay? And we know that there's something called the OB gene, the obesity gene, which if you have that gene, it doesn't necessarily mean you will be heavy, but it does increase your risk, and it does make it it does make it harder to keep weight off. So there are genetics. But then we look at environmental things like even fertilizers in the soil, plastics in our packaging and processing. There are now studies that demonstrate that some of the chemicals that are leached from the packaging into our foods, some of those chemicals are very similar to some of our own hormones, ghrelin and leptin, which control our hunger and our appetite, and it affects those. And so hormonally, we are affected by the packaging and the processing and, fertilizers. And then you throw in things like just the inactivity, we're using the remote controls, right? And we're not getting up to turn the TV on, and we're on our cell phones, and people just aren't as active, and they're not out working as hard as they did in the past. So environment, genetics, inactivity, stress, huge, and poor sleep. I mean, those are kind of your main core things. And we know from studies that when people don't get adequate sleep, and generally, if you're sleeping a good solid time period, even if it's a shorter time period, like, let's say it's 5 hours, but it's uninterrupted, that's better for you than when people are interrupted by sleep. So fall asleep, you wake up, you can't fall back to sleep, you're having a hot flash, or you're getting up to go to the bathroom, or, whatever. But then the other kind is when, you're laying in bed and you can't shut the brain off, right? But there's so much data out there now that talks about stress and lack of sleep and how that affects all of our hormones in our body, primarily insulin, and leads to metabolic syndrome, basically. And so we just need to learn as a society to just kind of chill out a little bit, but it's hard to do, right? So, yeah.
Very, very hard. So now you obviously you'd mentioned, and this I know about you in your practice, is you're not, one size fits all. But you also mentioned, like with metabolic syndrome, is we need to get to the root cause, right, of these chronic diseases, not just treat them with just the medications, even the newest weight loss meds, right?
Right.
There are certain lifestyle modifications and ways that obviously if we can do it without meds is much healthier. But even in with medications, they're not getting to the root cause.
Right. And again, I mean, there's the new GLP-1 agonist, semaglutide, Wegovy, Ozempic, those medications. Metformin's been around for a long time, and certainly there are definitely conditions and cases where those things are where those medications are going to be very, very beneficial. Okay. And I'm a physician, I prescribe medications. So I would never sit here and say, oh my gosh, don't ever use those medications, only use these products, because I think everybody has to realize that everybody's situations are different. And so if I do have somebody that maybe has a super high A1C or a super high glucose, and we got to get that blood sugar down now. I mean, they might end up on medication, but I really try to also utilize then some of the, the natural products. And again, we've got to change how they're eating, and we've got to change their activity level, and all of that has to work together. Because if you don't change your lifestyle and you don't, like you said, get at that root cause, you can use the medications and it's not going to make as big of a difference as it should. And then you go off the medications and everything's going to just come right back, So, so one thing I do, and I appreciate your comment, Suzanne, is I really do get to know my patients. It's very, very important to understand that every single person is different. Everybody's situations are different. And before I even get into treatment, I've already spent 40 minutes sometimes with people just learning about their lifestyle, their home life, their support group, their sleep habits, all of those things. And so it's lifestyle is critical.
Right.
So
now with this slide, would you say that those practices, that insulin lowering diet, is pretty much what you discuss with your patients?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And the way that I describe it to my clients is I like to sort of use a comment. I'll say the protein to carb ratio must always be greater than 1. In other words, we always prioritize protein and restrict carbs. And there might be some times where they might be fairly even. And there might be some times where protein's up here and carbs here. And there might be some times where there's no carbs and it's all protein, right? Where that ratio of protein to carbs is big. And I always tell them, the higher that ratio and the higher the difference between the protein and the carbs, the better people are going to do. And, it's also important to look at carbs and say, okay, we do have good carbs and we have bad carbs. I call them the good, the bad, the ugly. And so, we do need those good carbs also in our diet, the vegetables, but we have to watch fruits. I mean, fruits are important in our diet, but fruits are also sugar, and so it doesn't mean we shouldn't have fruit, but fruit's going to turn to sugar and it does stimulate insulin. And so if you've got somebody with insulin resistance, where their body's insulin doesn't work very well, then even though with fruit, it's a natural sugar. And so our body responds very well to that because it recognizes those sugars. So our sugar goes up, but then it comes down very quickly with natural sugar compared to, say, a slice of bread where it's processed sugars, or something packaged where it's processed sugars. our body doesn't recognize those sugars because the list of sugars is like, forever long, right? And so our body wasn't made to recognize those sugars. So therefore our insulin levels stay higher longer. So with fruit being a natural sugar, our insulin does spike because it still has to take care of that sugar, but it does come down very nicely. Unless you have insulin resistance, then it's going to stay up a little bit longer. So even fruits we have to be careful about. And one of the things I tell my patients is don't ever eat a carb without a protein. Don't even fruits. I mean, don't ever eat it without a protein. The protein helps to slow down that conversion to sugar. Anything that's higher in fiber is going to help to slow down that conversion to sugar. And again, looking at the good carbs, vegetables are going to be your best carbs, because they're lower in sugar, they're higher in fiber. In reality, we should just be eating proteins and vegetables mostly, right? So
Exactly.
it was that easy, right?
Exactly. Which brings me to that point. This started about 50 years ago, the big problem, right?
Yeah.
When the big food companies started removing the fiber from our diet and making these processed foods so convenient, accessible, and addictive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So,
Yep.
I mean, they're everywhere 24/7. And like you said, even our fruits and vegetables, the fruits, they are sugars. But I mean, our fruits and vegetables today, I mean, they're even being grown, domesticated for profit, right? They're huge.
I mean, look at if you go out to an orchard and you pick an apple, okay, and you compare how that apple looks to an apple in a grocery store that is like beautiful. It's beautiful and it's big and it's red and it's shiny. I mean, what has been done to that apple, right? It's been genetically modified. There's some sort of, they always have some sort of preservative spray on it so that it can sit out longer and it's shiny and beautiful and bigger, okay, because they are modified. And so there has been such a big change. And I like this picture. I've not seen this, but that's exactly what happens. And then you've got the manufacturers who, if you think about the fiber, you mentioned the fiber issue. If you take the fiber out of things, you're not going to get the fullness, and it's going to turn to sugar faster. So, you take an apple and you create apple juice. You've totally removed that sugar, that fiber, and you've created, a drink that is pure sugar, right?
Right, sugar and water, more or less.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they're calling the juices diabetes water, right? Because
it's
literally that's all it is sugar and water.
Yeah.
And and I'm sure, and so by removing that fiber, because we know fiber, fills us up, right? It keeps us fuller. We end up eating less. It slows down digestion, so it keeps us fuller. But when we remove that fiber, if you can speak to a little bit about this blood sugar roller coaster, you touched on it a little bit, but why does fiber help prevent this? And why today is that eating every 2 hours and the thought that we have to do that to keep our metabolism up? Speak to that. I mean,
yeah. So every time we eat, every time you eat, your body is going to produce some sugar, and especially, obviously with carbohydrates. So our body's response to protect us and to prevent us from hopefully getting diabetes is that insulin, is released from our pancreas to help that blood sugar. So the only way that our body can use glucose as a source of energy, as a source of fuel, is that it has to, inside a cell, there's an energy equation that glucose enters to produce energy, okay? But glucose has to enter that cell. And so the only way glucose can enter that cell and become energy is if insulin attaches to that cell, and insulin is called the gatekeeper. So when insulin attaches to the cell, the gate opens up and glucose goes in, and now it can become used as a source of energy. But when our body doesn't respond to insulin very well, that gate doesn't always open, okay? And so our blood sugar levels become higher. And then what happens is when we're constantly eating as depicted in this picture, your insulin level is never going down because our body is constantly saying, okay, we got to take care of this. We got to take care of this. And so it's constantly producing insulin. And when insulin is up, you can't burn fat. And that's something that I really, really push with my patients. I tell them, don't ever forget this, is that if insulin goes up, your body cannot use fat as fuel and you will not lose fat. So our whole goal with how we eat and with the Feel Great program as well, but even if you're not on that, just how you eat, is we've got to keep insulin levels down. That's the only way we can burn the fat.
So, and an easy way to do that is in the Feel Great protocol is the fasting part.
Is the fasting, absolutely.
Yeah. Not getting energy from the foods, converting into carbs, that you're literally pulling your energy and fuel from your fat stores. And the only way that the body can tap into those fat stores is that glucose is down, insulin is down, and now your body can access the fat stores for energy.
Absolutely. And our body will always use carbs first as a source of fuel just because of the types of enzymes that are in our gut system. And so, and it's always using fat last. So if you've got a fair amount of carbs in what you're eating, your body's going to burn that first. But then by the time you get to the fat, your insulin's up and you can't use it. Or if you have lots of carbs, and your body doesn't need the energy unless you're, going out and running a 10-mile race, So, so we've really got to keep those carbs down. And the way you do that is by not snacking between meals, doing that prolonged fast. And it's very safe and it's very beneficial, for people to keep that insulin down that way.
Okay. So as let's just jump, let's get going. Sorry, I'm sitting here trying to work my slides, right?
That's okay. I'm talking probably more than you want me to.
Oh, no, this is perfect. This is beautiful. This is exactly, I was getting to a slide to where we could start. So let's just jump in and see, okay, so and how you've seen this in your patients, what attracted you to the balance, to the Unimate? How do these tools now bridge that gap? How do they address fiber? And maybe you can speak to the tune of balance and why that's so unique out there in this vast array of different types of fibers, right? Metamucil, benefiber, etc.
Yeah. I love the balance, and ever since I was introduced to this program, well, this, to Unicity, the balance, I've always said that the balance has always been my favorite. And if somebody says, if you can do one product, it would be the balance. But now we got the Unimate, so I'm a little on the the edge. So
that's why this program has both of them.
But it's great because it has both. But
it's for you.
Anyways, because of our lack of fiber, because manufacturers have taken the fiber out of most of our food, and a lot of people hate adding extra fiber. And what the balance is, it's a complex matrix of different soluble, insoluble fibers that slow down how quickly our food turns to sugar. And when you slow down that process, the insulin level stays down lower longer. So it creates an environment of slower digestion. You feel fuller longer. Your blood sugars will be more stable. Your insulin levels will be low. The other part of balance that I love is that there are studies that demonstrate how it works with the cholesterol and the triglyceride. It's kind of it's a complex process, but again, fiber slows down that whole process as well, kind of grabs onto that cholesterol molecule, if you will. And that's, I mean, in simple layman's terms, it's much more complicated than that, but it then decreases the amount of cholesterol and triglycerides in your bloodstream. And I've seen such great changes in, LDL, triglycerides, HDL, as well as obviously the hemoglobin A1C and the blood sugar. So.
One thing I wanted to ask as well is we didn't talk about this, but I mean, IBS, dysbiosis, irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, our gut health today for most people is just a mess. I mean, IBS affects 1 in 5, which we know then leads to like mental health issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
Yep.
fact, type 3 diabetes is insulin resistance of the brain. It's Alzheimer's.
Right.
Right. So insulin
Yep.
resistance, elevated levels, type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's. So it's important to get that matrix that we talk about in balance, right? That can actually provide some prebiotics
Mm-hmm.
in the gut, improving that gut microbiome.
Absolutely. Yep. And again, that goes back to our environmental changes and the types of foods that people eat. You get most of we have to have good bacteria in our gut to help the digestive process. But we don't get enough of that good bacteria anymore because a lot of it's been removed in the soils and with fiber, with fertilizers, and again with packaging and processing. And so our gut microbiome, our gut balance of good and bad bacteria is off. And so we always want way more good bacteria than bad. And our bad bacteria live off of sugar. Our good bacteria live off of fiber. And so by adding more fiber and adding products like this, we're improving the good bacteria in our gut, and by restricting our carbs and keeping that blood sugar level down, we're not feeding the bad bacteria. So it does create a much more balanced gut system.
Okay, beautiful. And again, Unicity is just ongoing with their clinicals, their studies, the validation of the balance, really controlling the blood glucose levels. I mean, in one recent study, it showed even 2 hours after eating that blood glucose level had actually, glucose response was lowered by almost 43%.
Mm-hmm.
So, I tell people that this is your protection, right? It's just not about getting any fiber. I mean, this is literally a protection against not only adding more fiber, but against what's in our foods and what they're doing to our bodies. And then obviously adding in what we're not getting in our foods.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually done a little bit of this experiment myself. I wore one of those glucose monitors for a couple of weeks, and I just started trying different foods. Didn't want to do it much longer than that because I found myself eating way too many carbs because I was doing so many experiments. But
Before and
I
after
did,
results, right?
yeah. So it was very interesting because I would eat like a bowl of cereal without taking the balance beforehand and see what my blood sugar was, 30 minutes after 60 and 90. And then the next day I did the same thing, but I took the balance beforehand and my blood sugar was probably 30, 40 points less.
Yeah, amazing.
So, it was great I mean, I know the studies, I know the science, I believe in that, but I felt, okay, I got to do this myself and really prove to myself,
Right.
and it's real. So.
See, and I think everyone on this call tonight is in that same position, right? I understand what you're all telling me, but I need to kind of know this for myself. I need to prove it. And that's why we really do encourage, for people to do before and after blood work. Correct. And that's not always real convenient. I mean, but obviously blood doesn't lie. Those glucose monitors you're seeing in real time what's happening. You're actually saying, okay, I don't have to think I'm just feeling better. The numbers are actually proving that. And what I love is Unicity is now made available for all of our members an actual A1C test kit, right? That all members can purchase. It's $45. They can use their HSA, their FSA card, and it's just shipped directly to their home. They can do the before, and then they can do 12 weeks later, they can do the after.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know we've had this conversation where the A1C is a much greater indicator of your true diabetic score than just
Absolutely.
glucose.
Yeah, absolutely. Your glucose level really is only telling you what is your blood sugar right now at the time of the blood draw. And it doesn't say anything about where it is after you eat, or 2 hours after you eat, or 3 hours after you eat. And so the A1C is a 3-month average of every blood sugar that you possibly have every second of every minute of every hour of every day for a 3-month period. So it's a much better indicator of what's happening, on a general basis. So
Yeah. And that with that indicator too, one thing that just popped up in my mind is a lot of people that are very insulin resistant, or they've got high levels of, they've got high blood sugars, et cetera, but they're definitely insulin resistant or pre-diabetic. Some will experience that when they start this protocol, their blood sugars, and especially intermittent fasting, their blood sugars will increase. And as I understand that, that's pretty much your body releasing and get rid of a lot of that stored glucose that's been stored in the liver, et cetera, right?
absolutely. Yep. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, I mean, so that should not be alarming
Right.
to
Right.
people. Can
You have
you?
to look longer term, so.
Okay. All right. So the balance, let's go in and let's talk about, so balance is to be taken before the meal, right? Your largest
Yep.
meal. Okay. Unimate. How another factor and another practice, of course, is intermittent fasting. Why intermittent fasting and why Unimate?
Well, the
Instead of just
intermittent
water,
fasting,
right?
what?
Instead of just water.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we still want our water, important,
Right.
but the beauty of Unimate is that, I mean, we want to be fasting. You don't want to be snacking between those meals. Um, the whole concept behind sort of this a little bit more of a prolonged fast, where you're skipping breakfast and using the Unimate in place of breakfast, because when you're sleeping, because you're not eating while you're sleeping, you're already in a fat burning state. Okay, so you're already burning fat through the night, because you've gone a few hours from your last meal. So your body needs something to fuel, even though you don't need a lot of it during sleep because our metabolism is lower, but you're in a fat burning state through the night. And so when you get to that morning and now you get up and you're awake and you're starting to move around, your body needs more. It needs more fuel. And so some people will eat, and when you eat, food is fuel, but when you eat, you're keeping metabolism up, and metabolism is calorie burning. It's not really fat burning. And nowadays, because of the increase in visceral fat, and really this is the big problem, is we want to force the body to use our fat as fuel. Okay. It's not as much about burning the calories as it is about getting rid of the fat and really drawing from that visceral fat that's in our bellies. So the beauty of Unimate is not everybody can go, skip breakfast and go till lunch. But the beauty of the Unimate is it doesn't break the fast. Okay. And because it doesn't break the fast and our body needs fuel, it's going to go to your own fat and it's going to use your fat as fuel. And they've even demonstrated, a rise in ketones after drinking the Unimate, right? It also has in it chlorogenic acid that is sort of a mood enhancer. And so it just kind of gives you that feel good feel. theobromine is sort of a more natural caffeine and a very like a mild, we don't get this jitteriness. So it's a really nice way to get a little bit of extra energy, but it's also a mental energy that we get. And then also some recent studies have demonstrated that Unimate is now it's promoting our own body's GLP-1. So GLP-1 is a hormone that our intestines produce that goes to the brain and says, hey, you're full, okay? The problem is it doesn't stay around very long. And so now we've got, all these new medicines out there, the GLP-1 agonist, and they work. They're very synthetically produced, and yes, I do prescribe them in some people. Depends again, everybody's got different situations, right? But it's very synthetic. It's an injection you do once a week. It's a very high dose of GLP-1, and so there's a much higher risk of side effects. The three things that the GLP-1 does is again, it's a hormone that goes to the brain and says, hey, you're full, but it also slows down stomach motility so that food sits in your belly longer, so you feel fuller faster. And then the third thing that it does is it actually stimulates the pancreas to pump out just enough insulin to take care of that blood sugar, okay? But that insulin is acting a little bit more on our brain rather than our metabolic cells. And the beauty of Unimate is that the recent studies have demonstrated that it actually increases our own natural GLP-1 after you drink it. So what's better than your own natural GLP-1, going up rather than taking something synthetic? And that is that I feel like the beauty of this is it's something that you can do long-term, get all the benefits, that we can get from the synthetic. And it's just a great tool. It's a great tool.
Yeah. And that GLP-1, I mean, not only that, but the ongoing studies, as I know you're, very familiar with too, is in addition to drinking water, but the benefits of Unimate show that it promotes weight loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it not only provides every essential nutrient, takes your mind literally off, and what you just described that the GLP-1 does, Unimate is doing it naturally, right? It literally takes the head traffic away. I mean, you're not hungry.
Right.
You have the cravings.
Right. We call it the food noise. It takes away the food noise.
Yeah. So, and then they also noticed that the skeletal muscle expenditure was more, you were burning more, right? Getting more output from your muscle, but it wasn't exhausting the muscle. You were actually enhancing the function,
the energy
within the muscle.
Right.
And then also too, the liver, right? Improving the liver enzymes. And liver function, which a lot of medications, you've got to test those every 3 months to make sure the liver and the kidneys are functioning properly, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So anything else on Unimate? The chlorogenic acid, it's also kind of similar to it's a natural insulin sensitizer, right? Similar to that of metformin.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's just, I love the products because they're natural. I love using the products because I think that when we use things like that also, I think it creates structure. And the Feel Great system is it's so easy. I mean, you drink that Unimate in the morning, whether that's hot or cold. We know that it doesn't break the fast. So really you can drink it any time of day.
Mm-hmm.
You can drink it 3 times a day if you want, or more. But to wake up in the morning and start with that, it's going to help to prolong that fast, which then forces our body to use fat as fuel. We're getting at that visceral fat. And then a lot of times now we're suggesting that you even take one. You can even take one at lunchtime. You can take one mid-afternoon, just kind of as a pick-me-up and just kind of as a great accelerator to ketosis, which is fat burning.
Right. So that accelerated, but also again, just cutting out the hunger, right? The food.
Yeah,
mood.
the mood. Yeah.
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 Enhancing that and cognitive function. I mean, also even like exercise. I use mine as a pre-workout, right?
Mhm.
I get more
Mhm.
out of my workout, mental endurance, clarity. And
Right.
the thing that I love about this in doing a lot of social media like we do is there's a lot of options for yerba mate, right? There's a lot of options out there for fiber. But
Mhm.
Unicity's gone the extra step on everything to put the Unimate through a 5-step purification, which is actually enhancing the chlorogenic acid by 370 times more than other yerba mates, right? 10 times more than a cup of coffee. That's
Yep.
not the caffeine, that's the chlorogenic acid, right?
Right. Right.
And the balance doing that matrix of fiber rather than just a single psyllium husk fiber.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so that combination is just and speak to the simplicity of the system. I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you do your Unimate in the morning, again, whether it's hot or cold. Um, and then all you have to worry about is a simple lunch and your dinner. Or I mean, if you really want to extend your fast, you can do a Unimate in place of lunch as well. I don't have a lot of people who do that, but I do have some who prefer to do that as well. And then you take the balance just before dinner. So it is just such a simple system and you feel great. It works, it burns fat, you have great energy. And I guess, I mean, other than the weight loss and getting at the visceral fat, let's not forget about the whole metabolic syndrome thing, right? I mean, again, it's the #1 medical diagnosis in the world, and this is what that treats. Metabolic syndrome, which is your cholesterol issues, your blood sugar issues, your circumference of your waist. And this takes care of that.
Renee shared, she says, I've been on a little over a month and feel so much better already, which is great. More
Nice.
energy, better sleep, weight loss.
Yep.
Speak to better sleep. How is this improving our sleep?
Well, I think that, and there's a lot of different ways. I think, just again, it affects hormonally. I think people sleep poorly when they eat too late and they eat too big of a meal at night. They feel miserable, and so the balance also creates some fullness, and so it does prevent people from overeating. The other reason people don't sleep is because of insulin and blood sugar issues. So, if you're not eating the right things, the balance, can keep that blood sugar and insulin down. When that insulin's up, at going into bedtime, then you don't burn the fat. That insulin again mimics some of our other endocrine neurohormones that affect melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. And so I think if we can just stay on a nice structured system, that, our sleep is better. I mentioned that I was just at this conference, and in that conference, there were 3 separate lectures, every one of on sleep. And the amount of hormones that are affected when we don't sleep well is just incredible. And this is all a lot of new data coming out. So sleep is very, very important. So I think that the calming effect of the Unimate, the suppression of insulin, the suppression of eating too big of a meal at night. I mean, all of those things make a difference. So,
Right.
and all of those things together also, we never talked about blood pressure, but just I see in my patients, over time, that as all of these other things improve, their blood pressure really starts to come down and improve, as well. So, it's amazing.
Right.
It's great.
I mean, everything you've described, Dr. Andruss, there's probably, people would be on probably about 5 to 10 different medications for that, right? Because
Mhm.
there's not one single medication that can treat all of those symptoms.
Right. I mean, if you have metabolic syndrome, you end up on at least 3 different medications,
Okay.
typically,
But if we can
so.
get down, like we've discussed, down to the root cause, which is insulin resistance in most cases, right? The majority
Mhm.
of people. And we can treat that with this intervention, the fiber fasting, these protocols, then literally we start healing and getting rid of all of those outlining symptoms, right?
Mhm.
Or can.
Right. Yep. Yep, absolutely.
All
I
right.
saw a question pop up about
Okay.
when the timing on the balance, which is a new, it's been shown in some of these newer studies. We used to do it 10 to 15 minutes before the meal, and the newer studies have demonstrated that you can take it just before you sit down and eat. And you don't have to wait that 10 to 15 minutes anymore. That's correct, right? And
Correct.
so that is definitely going to improve compliance, because so many times my patients will end up with so many more balance in their box than they do with the Unimate. And it's because, they forget to take, and they're like, oh man, dinner's ready and I forgot to take it. So then they don't take it, right? So now, I mean, everybody's super excited about this because I don't have to worry about that timing thing,
Right.
and so just get it in your system.
Yep.
That's
Exactly.
what you got to do.
Exactly. Now there was one question saying, can I take Unimate? Let's say Unimate and balance, right? The whole protocol. If someone is on Mounjaro or any of the semaglutides.
Absolutely. Yep.
In fact, I look at this, if someone's currently on it, they don't want to stay on it. This is a good exit strategy, right? Even
Absolutely.
using it
Yep.
while they're on it.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
I have actually done that quite a bit because, again, I do prescribe some of the Mounjaro and the semaglutide and Ozempic in some of my patients. And those who are ready to sort of go into maintenance, this is a great way to transition them. And it's something that they can do forever because, nobody wants to be on those shots forever.
Right.
And they're pricey. They have to be kept cold. I mean, they're more of a hassle. So I have a lot of my patients who do it during and while they're on those shots, the Mounjaro, or the Ozempic, but I also am utilizing it a lot as a transition phase.
Okay. And I get asked this all the time, is there contraindications with taking this and any other medications? Obviously, this is food, but there's no
No.
contraindication. One of the other questions on here is, what about men that suffer from erectile dysfunction? How does it help them and stress levels are high? We talked a little bit to PCOS, but what about
Yeah.
both of those?
That's a tough one because erectile dysfunction can be for a lot of different reasons. If it's stress related, if it's mild hormone dysregulation, then certainly I think that it can improve that, just like we see with women with hormonal imbalance. But the way, like, if the erectile dysfunction is due to, say, a low testosterone in somebody who's overweight, many times losing the belly fat will allow that testosterone to go up. There's an enzyme in our fat cells that converts testosterone to estrogen. And so when it's converting to estrogen, then the level of testosterone is not as high. So as you get rid of fat cells, that enzyme goes down, which means then testosterone levels go up. So in where that is the situation, and we're really forcing, with our Feel Great system, we're really working on that visceral fat. Certainly we can see elevated testosterone levels as they lose that visceral fat for that reason. Constipation, a lot of people say that they're constipated, but constipation, does that mean true constipation is hard stool? Okay. But some people will say I'm constipated, but really it's just that they're not going as much. And part of the reason they're not going as often is because they're not putting the volume in. And so as your bowels change and your microbiome and your bacteria change, it's not uncommon for the bowels to change, at least in the beginning, just until things kind of get balanced out, you know. If it's hard stool, I mean, the best thing is just lots of water and make sure you're doing fiber. And because the balance is you know, a matrix of different fibers, most of the time taking the balance will help constipation. If it's not, take 2 a day. And you can still add extra fiber, and that's usually, you know, what helps most people. What leads to a bowel movement is you've got to have enough volume in your colon to hit the nerve endings which lie in the lining of the colon. And so when we're putting in less food, we don't get that stimulation of the colon that moves things along. And so then stuff sits in there and you know, doesn't absorb the water, and it becomes more of a hard stool. So by adding the fiber component, whether it's you know, Unicity's Life Fiber, or the Balance, and I would highly recommend the Balance because it does a lot of other things as well. But you're creating more bulk in the colon, and when you create more bulk in the colon, you get more stimulation of those nerve endings, which then stimulates the bowels and prevents that constipation.
Right. Okay, so we are going to wrap this up. I just want to share this really quick. So all of you can see that. So as we just wrap this up, one thing that I want to mention with the Balance is this is a highly, I mean, advanced fiber matrix. And I always tell people, if you're dealing with any gut issues to begin with, you want to start out on this slowly. Start out with like a half a pack for 1 or 2 days and get your body a little bit acclimated, especially your gut acclimated to this fiber. And if you start to become constipated, like Dr. Andruss said, add a little bit more, go grab some water, get that fiber flushing through your system. But it's just indication that you have a really poor gut situation going on, and your gut's going to love this. You are going to be regular with this and just feel so much lighter. But if you need that adjustment period, take it. If you haven't gotten a hold of our one-page food guide, if you're not working with someone that is effectively coaching you on this, reach out to myself, reach out, you know, and we'll get you connected. But on this food guide, it's going to tell you what foods, what vegetables are the high fiber foods that you should be focusing on to help move that through. The same with the Unimate is there's no contraindications, but if you know of anyone that might be a little bit sensitive to caffeine, the only caffeine in here is natural occurring caffeine. There's no added caffeine, there's no artificial caffeine. But if they're sensitive, recommend that they start out with a half a packet, right? And work up like one for a couple days, and make sure they're using enough water. Unimate, you can literally mix. This is the least amount I ever mix mine with, is a full water bowl full, right? Which is about 16.9 ounces. But I drink it sometimes with 32 ounces. I'm sipping on it all morning long. I'm sipping on it throughout the afternoon. Balance is another animal. You mix this with 6 to 8 ounces of water, you give it 4 or 5 quick shakes, and you drink it immediately. It's a no mess product. It takes you 30 seconds or less to do it, right? But there's certain things. That's why you've got to be working with someone and that can help you navigate through this initial week or two. And so reach out to the person that introduced you to this, reach out to myself, and we'll make sure that we help you navigate through that and have a positive experience. But most of the time, since this is real food, these are very highly quality metabolic products, is your body's not used to it. So you just got to give it time, right? And acclimate it slowly. So Dr. Andruss, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your brilliant mind.
You're welcome.
And joining us tonight on this. I appreciate that, as I'm sure everyone does.